Hey guys, so this is the third ATP match of the year. This is actually the first time I agree with a John Silk placement as well. And I think I will agree with him on the number 2 and number 1 as well. But of course, before then, on every single one of these that I did, you could hear me just talking about, no, John is not right putting that in that spot. But anyway, I'm here with James, not Mario, unless you've seen the title. You might have been you might be confused right now, but it's actually going to be James. Yes, and
Yeah, I've
yeah,
sort
we're
of
going to be talking
transformed
about.
from
Yeah,
Mario into me almost.
yeah.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
an
cool.
upgrade? Is that a downgrade? I mean, you guys tell us. But yeah, anyway, how are you? And we're going to be talking about Sinner Djokovic in Turin, of course.
We are. I am doing good. I hope you're doing well as well, Damien. On this, very the shortest day of the year, of course, it is today in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's
Ooh.
we get as much sunlight as we can, and of course, it's we're all still clambering for tennis to sort of come. At least I feel I'm clambering for tennis to come back now. I think about the breaks too much, but yeah, to talk about this sort of great match that is sort of taken the bronze position on the rankings. With Sinner versus Djokovic. A small chink in the armor of Djokovic's season. You could pretty much call this match.
Yeah, probably
Maybe.
one of the reasons why there is some consideration that maybe in the last 2 or 3 months Sinner was actually as good as Djokovic, but of course Novak ended up winning this event. But we'll get to that. Maybe let's start by talking about the matchup as a whole, because going into Turin, it was 3-0 for Djokovic. And well, he defeated Sinner. In case someone doesn't remember, I will read out that he defeated Sinner in Monte Carlo 2021, and then of course twice at Wimbledon. So was this like a big milestone to you also in that way, that Sinner ended up picking up his first win over Djokovic? Because when it comes to the Medvedev matchup, I think we were definitely looking at it like that. I mean, there it was 0-6, so like double the amount of losses. But even here, Sinner even once led Djokovic 2-0 in sets in Wimbledon. But as we all know, it was like the most lopsided five-setter in history. And once the third set actually started, it never really got any close to a Sinner victory. So was this like as important as beating Medvedev for the first time for Sinner, or maybe more important because it's Djokovic?
Yeah, I mean, it's Djokovic. I mean, the course is going to be. I mean, no offense to any Medvedev fans in the chat, but beating Djokovic is significantly more harder than it is beating Medvedev at points. I mean, beating Medvedev is really hard as it is anyway, but it's almost as though sticking new game plus on when it comes to when it comes to sort of trying to beat Djokovic, especially when he's on form. I do think there was real significance coming into this match, just down to the fact of what happened at Wimbledon, a couple of months prior. Losing to Djokovic at Monte Carlo in 2021, Sinner's still coming up the rankings. There's a chance to try and match himself against one of the best in the world. Pretty much at that point, nobody really would expect you to win, but at least to be able to put a good show on and then try and build from there. Going up, but certainly coming off the back of the Wimbledon result from 2022. People were like, okay, maybe this match will be competitive. Maybe this contest could end up, having something connected to it. But the way in which Djokovic dismantled Sinner in that Wimbledon final was quite alarming almost. And I think a lot of the narrative, I think we all saw both on, social media and on here as well, was that whenever we got draws that popped up afterwards, we were really hoping that one side of the draw would have Alcaraz and Sinner because we knew that matchup would be competitive. And then the other side of the draw would have Medvedev and Djokovic because that would also be a competitive matchup. If you switch Sinner and Medvedev in their places, people were really disappointed because it then became a very one-sided matchup because Alcaraz was constantly beating Medvedev and Djokovic felt like he had his number on Sinner. But, certainly in the latter half of this year, and, we come to the US Open and it came to this, those two forms started to move around. And, this was the sort of perfect, you could probably say the perfect environment for Sinner to be able to then go, right, I've got the crowd behind me. It's an indoor hard. I'm very good on indoor hard. Let's go and take it to Djokovic. And, there was a lot of other factors on Djokovic's side, which meant his level was slightly lower than what we would usually expect from Djokovic. He was talking about how his motivation had completely, well, I say completely. His motivation had dropped after he got the year-end number one in the previous match against Rune. So it was almost like the perfect hotbed almost for Sinner to really sort of take it to Djokovic in this contest.
Yeah, and by the time we got like to the group stage, even to the draw, not even to this match, but like before Djokovic clinched the number one, I think people were actually already really excited for this one, right? Because it seemed like Sinner has just made so much progress since Beijing, since Vienna, the post-puke variation, let's say, of Jannik Sinner, and yeah, as you said, I mean, the rapid courts in Turin, absolutely a perfect chance, and definitely it was different there at Wimbledon, where we were like, yeah, as you said, at Wimbledon, everyone was like, "Can we swap the semis?" Whereas in the ATP finals, when we had the groups, I think a lot of people were already thinking, "Yeah, I want to see Djokovic Sinner now. Like this is actually a match that right now could be very interesting." And I guess in the end, it was the result where Djokovic loses an inconsequential match and then wins the important one. But of course, it didn't feel like that at the time. It didn't feel like it was inconsequential. It was actually kind of wild that Sinner still wasn't qualified after this. But anyway, yeah, let's maybe start talking about the match then. Of course, we have the opening set, which, as usual in Turin, features a lot of straight holds. But still, I mean, the way Sinner is especially holding on to his serve, right? The improvements that he made there, along with his team, of course, in the second half of the year, I feel like that's a big theme for this match as well. Because outside of one game, I think he wasn't even broken, right?
Yeah, I think for both. What was it? When it comes to both of them, Djokovic was only broken twice, and that was
Yeah.
that was literally the last service game for Djokovic in the first set, and then also midway through the third. I mean, I had a quick glance over the stats again for both.
Mm-hmm.
Bizarrely, actually, both players didn't really have a great in terms of first service game. Generally, I mean, and that translated to all the sets. I mean, both players were only low 60s when it comes to percentages, and when you think of a top 10 player, you kind of think that you kind of expect that their serve percentages are going to be much higher than that, closing on mid to high 60s, potentially even low 70s. But when they were firing those first serves, there was very low return percentage points of points being won. Both players were basically around about 20% on each other's first serves when it came to being able to actually win points off them, which is incredibly low and led to like you say, the first set going the way it did. Hold. I mean, Sinner's serve has massively I say increased, but got better in terms of its placement, um, in terms of its speed as well, which then actually has turned it into a real weapon for him, which is incredibly important to be able to get those 3 points and to use that as a key weapon on your service games, because you want to make them as easy as possible, as was seen with certainly as was seen with this match here. But not to knock off Novak Djokovic, who's got arguably one of the best serves on the actual tour in terms of its placement, in terms of its speed, and taking into account, he said the very quick Turin courts. I mean, I believe the pace index for or the court speed index for the Turin surface was around about 45. I think like 45.5 or something like that, which is incredibly fast in terms of for a main tour court. I mean, most other courts, tend to be around about mid to high 30s. Never mind actually going mid 40s in terms of speed. So carrying on both the pace and the placement that both players had meant that, as you say, it was very much, I trade you one serve, you trade me another, all the way to the end in terms of being able to hopefully maybe get those odd little points that you can then sort of tackle and go for.
Yeah, I'm now rewatching the 5-all game in the opening set, which of course is really crucial. Djokovic actually led 40-15. Then he sort of like approaches the net. It's a pretty weak try. Sinner passes him without any issues, but you think at the time that, well, it might still be inconsequential given it was at 40-15. But then Sinner comes up with a couple of these great points where he just randomly hits a strong shot out of nowhere, which is probably his trademark, really, probably the thing that he does best. And he suddenly breaks Djokovic, which I guess at the time, must have felt like a bit, out of the blue for sure. And he manages to clinch the next game very easily as well, going up one set love on Djokovic.
No, and it's incredibly important. Whenever you're playing Djokovic, if you can try and get that first set. I know he's got an incredible record at Grand Slams, which is that I think he's only ever lost a Grand. I think in the last recent years or something in finals, he's never lost he's only ever lost twice a Grand Slam match or a final match where he's been leading off the first set. So I know that's translating to the Grand Slam arena. But generally, you want to be making sure that you are keeping your nose ahead against Djokovic all the way through, because if he did take that first set, it could end up being quite a bloody and brutal second set following on from that.
Yeah, and the quality, of course, remains very, very high throughout set 2 as well. I have this ridiculous point really here at 1-2 love 30, where Sinner could be in real trouble, of course, potentially facing 3 breakpoints. Djokovic sends him wide on this forehand, and Sinner just finds a ridiculous angle here to save himself. Djokovic claps, of course, as he often does after great shots from the opponent. But yeah, there's really lots of positives still for Sinner, even though he loses this set, right? I mean, he again holds 6 times against Djokovic. He again is like pretty comfortable actually, like going to the net. He is he's not just glued to the baseline, but he's actually using all of that tactical improvement as well that we've seen since puking in Beijing. And
I mean, one of the interesting things in which I saw when I was watching some of the extended highlights was how well Sinner was able to bring Djokovic to the net and then really exploit him there, which is such a it's such a great skill to be able to have, to be able to both be able to draw your opponent in and then be able to just finish them off with a quite what could be a straight a very straightforward passing shot winner. I mean, one of Djokovic's key skills in his games is that he likes to dictate from the back of the court, and only really one or two players on the actual tour are able to really match him on a baseline to baseline exchange. Sinner at points can certainly do that, but he understood during the match, and that's a real testament to Sinner's development as a player, is that he was able to go, right, I'm not going to beat him if I just continuously keep on whacking it from baseline to baseline. I do need to bring him forward. I do need to change this up at points to really make Djokovic uncomfortable and to force either errors or to force openings against him to be able to get the win. Because you think about a year ago, Sinner naturally likes to stick on the baseline, likes very comfortable, just same type shot to same type shot, forehand, backhand, and just hoping he can hit his opponent off the court that way, or at least force them back enough for them to make a mistake. But for him to be able to then show that sort of emotional intelligence, and we could probably credit Darren Cahill in that, in terms of being able to show to Sinner that he needs to bring those extra elemental shots into his game to be able to then force those extra points out of him, or out of Djokovic on that one.
Yeah, and that's why Darren Cahill and Simone Vanozzi ended up getting the Coach of the Year award, which for some reason was actually controversial among the Novak fandom. But anyway, maybe some people would just like to, number one,
people take that way too seriously. I'm sorry. I mean, there was absolute uproar in it, wasn't it? That one, like sportsmanship for Alcaraz. I know from certain sections of the Djokovic faithful. It's just a silly little award that's voted on between players. I mean, yeah, okay, they have a little think. They vote for who they think's been quite a good sportsman, and then they put it through. Like, it isn't some sort of election to elect the president of the United States. It's just a fun.
I mean, they have some right to be angry, I guess, with the fact that he's never nominated for sportsmanship, whereas he has considerably helped the lives of other tennis players, and probably more so use that platform than Federer and Nadal. But anyway, of course, that's not about that. Given the Coach of the Year, of course, is voted by fellow coaches. So who are you even sort of disagreeing with here? But anyway, Howdy Matthew.
I mean, that one, I know it's a weird one, so you still go on.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
You look at development in that one. What was it? The 2021. It was Cameron Norrie who won it, because Facundo
Lugones, yeah,
got Norrie from being outside the top 30 to winning a Masters 1000 title and finishing the year in the top 10, or at least around the top 10. That is showing a huge sign of progress. And, a real good sign of a good coach is being able to take someone from quite far outside the rankings and quite low in terms of where they can get to in tournaments, and really progressing them through either into, like you say, into that top 20, top 10, being able to then get them to, big finals, or get them, deep in big Grand Slam events. That's a sign of an excellent coach. Not somebody who can come in to a player who's already number one in the world, and winning Grand Slams, and then for him still to be number one in the world and winning Grand Slams, you're not showing any real sign of coaching, prowess in doing that. But as much as I think Ivan Goran Izabinovic is a great coach, we need to see him taking somebody who's ranked 100 in the world and stick him into the top 10 to then really see how good of a coach he actually is. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant.
I mean, that's sort of right. I mean, I would be fine with him getting the award for sure. Like if there was no other amazing candidate, which pretty much this year, I think it was just a straight up, I mean, it has to go to Cahill and Vanozzi, because you just see such clear tactical improvement as well, such clear areas where you actually, feel like the coach improved the player. Whereas Djokovic sort of at this age, uses Goran probably more so for like mental support and like maybe throwing some ideas at him. He's as you said, he's so developed as a player. But anyway, Matthew, how do you we should probably have it on the screen. That's a nod to our producer that we are talking about Djokovic Sinner in Turin. Goran did alter Djokovic's serve, but that wasn't this year, right? So we're not really talking about it right here. But the last few years I've actually been really impressed with the choices in terms of coach of the year. But I guess that makes sense because the fellow coaches do that, right? So I mean, they should know best. And choices like Facundo Lugones or Fernando Vicente for Rublev in 2020, or even Cervara for 2019. I think all of these were really excellent. So that's probably the category that I've been like the most satisfied with, really. But anyway, we're not talking about that today. So let's maybe get to the second set tiebreak. It was actually Sinner with a mini break early. But there's this phenomenal point at 2-3 that Djokovic eventually wins. It's like one of these rallies where he just goes into lockdown mode. Everything is coming back. And eventually he forces an error from Sinner. And of course, as we all know, in a couple of points, it ended up taking him to one set all. I remember there was what was it against Rune maybe in that event? There was like a horrible tiebreak that Djokovic played. I think it was the second set tiebreak against Rune. But generally speaking, of course, he is really strong in these. And we will get back to that because it's actually a really important part of this match later on. But he just plays, he does what he does best in that second set tiebreak, Djokovic. I mean, he just basically doesn't miss and ends up, leveling the match against an opponent who was really like on fire going into that part of the match.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things in which, potential things that would affecting Sinner at the time, certainly would have been that, you got to a tiebreaker, if you win the tiebreaker, the match is over, that those sort of nerves may have started to play into Sinner's mindset. And as you say, Djokovic has been the king of it this year when it gets to a tiebreaker. I'm still going to play my top level. My opponent is not going to be playing his top level. And I'm going to be able to exploit him in those circumstances. I mean, what was a stat somewhere that I saw that was for the entirety of the French Open, and I think up until like the final at Wimbledon, and every tiebreaker Novak played, he never made an unforced error. I mean,
it was like 50 something points, right? It got to that,
nuts, absolutely nuts stats. I mean, it shows how much of a superhuman Novak Djokovic is at that same time. But that is almost the embodiment of the saying, keep playing your level when you get to those tight moments, because he wasn't missing. He was making sure his opponents were really really solid make sure his opponents were the ones that were going to drop their level, really being solid on all the facets of his serve, and okay, he's had a couple of mistakes popped up. I also think that we'll probably get onto it, but the third set against that was actually the next set straight after the tiebreaker there. Oh no, there wasn't the tiebreaker on that one. Like you said, the one against Rune was a bit of a shocker on that one. Was it a tiebreaker? Yeah, it was a tiebreaker. Okay,
it was a tiebreaker. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
it was a tiebreaker. My mind's completely gone on that one. Sorry, Damien. The third set tiebreaker was unfortunately that high level wasn't able to continue on to there, and Sinner then kind of kept his level during that tiebreaker. But we'll get to that in a bit. But as you say, that consistency that Novak's shown in all his tiebreakers, keeping his levels, leads to winning tiebreaks and really disenfranchising your opponents.
Yeah, it's really like percentage tennis at its best, and yeah, that's what Novak does so well, and that's what got him so deep. Of course, over that's really like simplifying it, but like that's why he has the slams that he has. And yeah, just to sort of refer to the stat that you mentioned earlier, when Novak won the first set this year, he only lost twice in 49 matches, and that was of course against Musetti in Monte Carlo, where he wasn't fit, and also against
Mm.
Alcaraz at Wimbledon. So yeah, that best of five, I guess it's going to be a little different because you have more time to regain, well, that 0-1 deficit. But yeah, anyway, I actually also noticed that on the head-to-head page on the ATP Tour site, Sinner and Djokovic, the match isn't mentioned. Turin, actually, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
I noticed that they've got a new look on the website as well, which was a bit of a
Yeah,
bit of a shock when I
it
logged onto that
seems
today.
horrible to me. It seems horrible to me, but
A
well,
lot more curved. There's a lot more curves on it. But the
maybe we'll just
yeah,
get
they've not
used to
got
it.
they've not got it up. But I've clicked onto the World Tour thing, and like if you go a little bit further into the website, you can find the match. But yeah, like it's yeah, I don't understand why
It
they've
is
not got
included
this.
in the overall result, right? I mean, in the 4-2 head-to-head score, let's say, let's call it. I don't know. In the wins, it is included, but it's not in the event
Yeah, you
breakdown.
can't find you
So
can't find the match. You just click on the head-to-head itself. You have to like go onto the tournament and then go to the
yeah,
matches in that tournament to be able to then open it up. Obviously, the people at ATP were like, "There's only one match that takes place during that World Tour finals, and it's the last match they play. You know that round robin match doesn't exist."
that's how Novak Djokovic surely will want to want it to be. But yeah. Anyway, there's that sixth game of the third set then, which at the time Sinner is just absolutely firing. He gets this amazing forehand cross court return. Uh, obviously, huge reaction to it as well. He seems really locked in, and at 4-2, he finds himself just two holds away from the match. But of course, it wasn't quite so simple. Even though I still see that in the next game, he played a couple of amazing points. I mean, that forehand drop shot, for example, it's not like a typical Sinner drop shot. It's not a Sinner drop shot from the first half of the season when he hits it at 15:30. But of course, he does drop serve eventually. The break was never consolidated, right?
No, and it was something that Novak was incredibly good at throughout the entirety of Turin. Actually, was when he got broken, he breaks back instantaneously very well. I remember a couple of sets against Runa. Runa was able to get a break up, and instantaneously he was broken straight back. He was able to really either up his game, certainly in terms of became a lot stronger when it came to returning, but was also able to really capitalize on the mistakes that his opponent was showing as they would get quite tight in that second game. And it's the classic saying, which is a break's never really a break until it's consolidated straight after, and that's what Novak showed in that third set. And at that point, it very much did feel as though, okay, maybe we now know the direction of this match. That maybe would have been that point, that chance for Sinner to be able to sort of run away with it at this stage, or at least be able to take the match. And he wasn't able to do so. And you're kind of resigning yourself to the fact that it looks as though Novak's going to come on, really up his game, and he's going to end up walking away with this. And it was another bit of a testament to Sinner, that he was able to really refine his service form going into the next service game and taking it then all the way to the tiebreaker.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, I mean, the second set tiebreak was just so excellent from Novak. You just sort of expect him to do it again because, yeah, besides that one against Rune, throughout the year he barely had any poor tiebreaks, really. And I don't think it was really that poor from him either here. I actually think it was just Sinner, he so it sort of reminds me of the Sinner Medvedev Beijing match, which we also had on our list at number 7. I did the video for that with Mario, I think. And basically, both tiebreaks there were won by Sinner to 7-2, which is also the case here. And yeah, it just flows pretty similarly. Well, like at first, he just hits a couple of ridiculous shots to go 2 mini breaks up, and then there's never even a chance for Djokovic to win it, which is kind of wild when we're talking about Djokovic tiebreaks and not Djokovic tiebreaks like the one against Rune in the second set where he just sort of made 5 errors or something. But
It
here,
reminds me a lot. It
mhm.
reminds me a lot of a psych of what was it? It was there was I don't know if you watch cycling at all, Damien, or at least like track cycling at the Olympics. It
Cycling.
was.
I mean, I know how it looks.
You know, look, there was this one race. It was for the I think it was for the gold medal at the last Olympics,
Hmm.
and it was this British cyclist. I've forgotten his name. Something Trot. I think Jason Kenny. That was it. Jason Kenny. He in this final he kept on getting beaten in the like the semi-final beforehand and had to go through like some sort of like last chance doing repechage to get into it because he was sticking in the pack, and that kind of feels like what Djokovic, well at least what Sinner was doing in the previous tiebreak. But then in the final, what Jason did was he basically, as soon as this little the small cycle or the small little bicycle that was leading the pack first of all before it junks in for the last two laps. Jason, as soon as the cart that one went, he bolted it straight down the actual track itself for like half the actual length of the circuit, and just was like, right, I'm going to go straight out into the front. I'm going to try and hold on to the end. That's the only way in which I'm going to win this. And it kind of felt a bit like that for Sinner, where he was like, right, I'm just going to bolt it as quickly as I can to that, love 5 love 6 love, really try and catch Djokovic napping in that, and then hopefully be able to sort of stick out to the end. And that was exactly what kind of ended up happening, where that bolt out to the top of the points, managed to keep out there and managed to get to 7 at that point there. If that makes sense. And that's a really weird analogy that I was trying to show there.
No. It makes sense because it kind of starts for me with the second point already. That reactive return that Sinner takes so early, and just straight at Djokovic. He has no time to react to it at all, and that's sort of it. Like after that, Sinner just wins the next few points, and it's over. And to play a tiebreak like this, I remember it felt absolutely massive at the time to play a tiebreak like this against Djokovic, of course, because as I said, I mean, we've seen them, for example, in Beijing, and both the tiebreaks in the final against Medvedev. But to play a tiebreak like that against Djokovic, especially after 3 hours of play, because I think just before the tiebreaker we eclipsed that. And I mean, it was just spotless. I know he lost 2 points, but like they came way too late to really matter. And he also closed it out in good style, which I like. When a big win or like a very impressive performance is closed out with a winner with a good point. I mean, here is just a +1 forehand and a smash, but that already counts. That's a satisfying
if you're
finish.
a player, having that sort of finish is probably a bit like a bread and butter. It's not, you don't have to do theatrics at the back of the court from one side to the other, coming to the net with drop volleys and all sorts like that. It was right, stick him out wide. He then fires one back. Another strong forehand. Djokovic sticks it into the air. It's only going to really land on the in the service box, and then just whack it away. And then it's almost as though like the cookie cutter. You do it on it's the old saying from football. You do it on the training ground moves that you're doing there. It was like that, like if I do on the court with a training maneuver. Perfect, match over. Walk up to the net.
Yeah, so when we were doing the short list for the matches of the year, and we're sort of just deciding on 7 to include, there were a lot of 3-hour battles that we wanted to mention. A couple of tiebreaks in there, maybe even 3 tiebreaks in there, maybe some match points saved. So what takes this match for you like above that all? Why is it pretty much distinctly number 3? Because I feel like no one is really disagreeing with this. Like there's a clear top 2 in terms of the Djokovic Alcaraz matches. Both of them slightly bigger, let's say in stature or whatever. Then you have this one, and then there is a bit of a gap to me. Like I feel like it's definitely like distinctly the 3rd best match of the season. So what makes it better than all the other dramatic battles like this, going 3 hours, lots of tie breaks, lots of pressure points?
That's a very good question. I would certainly say, you can boil it down first of all to the quality of the hitting. Very low percentages of return points wrong. People keeping their serve really strongly, really, really being able to sort of go, right, I will hold my serve, you hold your serve. I hold my serve, you hold my serve. But then, the quality of the points hitting. I mean, I remember watching on the replays the fact that Sinner was able to really hit the ball consistently deep to the Djokovic, both forehand and backhand at the baseline. Similarly for the way Djokovic was able to get it back to Sinner. That played into having, a high quality match in which the winners were spectacular and the unforced errors were relatively low for both players. But then also, you look at the occasion. This is Sinner in Turin. This is the closest tournament he has to a home tournament in northern Italy. For him to be able to then really show what he can do there. And then certainly given the results that were coming into this match, with the fact that Djokovic had been close to being quite dominant in all three contests, and the way in which Sinner has developed, and certainly in the latter half of the year, to be able to get the victory as he did.
Yeah, and that's you said mine was good, but I actually love this one from John as well. Does Sinner winning elevate this match? And I would have to say yes. Like if Djokovic wins it, even in 3 hours, it's probably like around Djokovic Rune Paris, Djokovic Rune Turin, right? It's pretty similar then, I guess, if Djokovic ends up winning it. It's really not that much better then. But here with the whole storyline of Sinner getting that win. And yeah, Matthew is also right to point out the Wimbledon final. It's a bit of a similar case. Like if Djokovic wins the Wimbledon final, I don't think it's really a contender for the number one spot then. I actually don't know if it's the number one spot on the list for John, but I would say that right now it's like pretty close for me between Cincinnati and Wimbledon. But if Djokovic won that one, and of course it's no shade to Djokovic whatsoever, it's just the fact that him losing is basically already a storyline. It's already a narrative we can talk about. Whereas if he wins, it's like, yeah, I mean, he's won again. He is so impressive. But it sort of would fall into the category of all the matches that Djokovic won, and some of them being extremely close battles. But like, yeah, I do think that Sinner winning this one is actually huge in regards to the position of this match in our perception or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to beat the person who's arguably the greatest of all time, your match automatically gets elevated as one of the best of the year. As you say, the plaudits for Djokovic this year are numerable. In terms of winning 3 out of the 4 Grand Slam titles, winning 2 Masters events, the World Tour finals that he ended up doing at the end of the year. I mean, there's nothing that man had not, and he was basically one set or one dodgy, smash away from potentially winning Wimbledon as well. When you break it down, it's to be able to then get that victory over what is perceived as the better player or the basically the bigger giant, that is huge, and the furore and the energy that will get put around a match because of that, you said, does elevate it to a degree where it is a fantastic, it makes it a fantastic match.
Yeah, and that wasn't the last time they played in 2023 as well. We also got them, of course, facing each other in the final. We got them facing each other in the Davis Cup semis. Pretty historic match as well, given that Djokovic blew 3 consecutive match points. But do you think
I wonder how he did that. I still really wonder how he ended up doing. I was watching that match as well, and I was like, when he got to like 5-5 and Djokovic was 40 up, I was like, it's over. He's got him where he wants him. And then he played the most casual next 3 points I've ever seen Djokovic play. And then presto, Sinner walks away with it.
Yeah, and do you think because when we were deciding the shortlist with Jack and John on the Twitter space, we were sort of thinking, which of these 3 matches should we include Djokovic and Sinner? And I think actually all of us were in favor of the Turin one, but definitely Davis Cup did come into the conversation a little bit. Probably the ATP finals, the actual final, I don't think it really was there because we were just like, well, it's an individual performance that is really impressive, but as a match, it's probably a little, a lot behind these two, just given the fact that there was no drama, there was no, the scoreline was really lopsided. But yeah, were these two any close to making the list for you as well, close to being top 10 matches of the year? And did we choose right in terms of picking the match from the Djokovic Sinner trilogy to make this list?
No, I certainly think this one was the right one to pick. I know you've got a little slack for which one of the Medvedev Sinner matches you wanted to pick from. Yeah, Beijing or Vienna. I'm a Vienna, but that's my personal sort of preference on that one. But certainly, I think this is the best Djokovic Sinner match of the year. I don't think that I watched both matches in terms of referring to the David Davis Cup match, and I don't think the level that Djokovic showed in the Davis Cup was anywhere near the level that he was showing at the ATP finals. So certainly, although that was historic for Sinner as another title that he picked up here, it very much felt as though the Djokovic in the match for the round robin was the better match. I mean, the big question I kind of now want to flip to you, Damien, is do you think, certainly with the form that Sinner showed at the end of the year, do you think this will continue into the Australian swing and going on to the first half of next year?
That's a question that I also wanted to pose to you, of course. So yeah, it's good. It's good. We need to talk about that for sure. Like, how do we see this rivalry, and also Sinner progressing from here? I would love to say yes. I generally think that probably Australia is the slam I would most like to pick Sinner for next year, to like make the final or a title. I'm just a little bit worried that it is so early in the year. Like, if you swapped Australia and the US Open, I would love to pick Sinner as my Australian Open winner. But because it's so early in the year, I do have my my reservations. I don't know if they actually make sense. It's just the fact that we haven't seen Sinner in doing this in a best of five play, but especially rewatching the extended highlights of these matches recently, like this one or the Djokovic, not Djokovic, Sinner Medvedev in Beijing final. I do feel like the quality of play is just so good that I don't really know what will be stopping him. Fitness wise, it's been a while since he struggled too much. Of course, Beijing, yeah, he did puke, but he managed to get out of that pretty quickly. Of course, he withdrew in Paris, but that was like more so ridiculous scheduling from the organizers, and I don't think anyone can really blame him for that. And after all, he also said, and it's a very good quote, that basically right now he just knows his body better, and he just sort of knows what's okay for him and what's not, and playing 14 hours after finishing a match at 3 a.m. wasn't, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not one of these people who think it's soft or whatever. It is his right to withdraw. And I just don't know if we should have any concerns. I do wonder if he's like a bona fide contender for Paris, for London. I will have my doubts there probably. However, I mean, Australia should really suit him. He was in the forefront last year, losing to Tsitsipas. That was a five-setter. He wins that. Who knows? Maybe he makes the final, right? The top half of the draw did really open up at the time,
Yeah.
with Korda retiring as well in the quarters. You had potentially Lehechka and Kachanov for him on the way to the final. He would be the favorite in both matches. Basically, the only difference we should have this year in regards to, well, let's say there are two major differences in regards to contenders in Australia this year, which is Alcaraz and Medvedev. And
Yeah.
I don't want to say Nadal, sorry, John. I mean, I don't really think he's like a genuine Australian Open contender. We might be talking about it very differently when we get to the French, of course, or like the Olympics. But, it
Oh,
seems like it's a
they
bit
said
early.
that 2 years ago, Damien. They said that 2 years ago, and he
I
did,
know,
and he didn't.
I
But he
know, I
did.
know. We've said it many times about all of these big three superhumans, as you called them earlier. But I mean, I think it's going to be slightly more competitive simply this year than it was last year, when it was Djokovic just destroying the whole field. Enzo
Mm.
Kouakou, the only player who took a set of him. But then you have the final against Tsitsipas, which is a bit of a dire watch. Not that the quality isn't high, but you just sort of know what's going to happen, and you don't feel like there's any sense of urgency. So I mean, I was talking about it for a while, and they didn't actually say that much, but let's just say that he is among the top four contenders for me. I don't know if quite top two, but then again, there are like a lot of doubts regarding Alcaraz and Medvedev as well. Alcaraz, the last 2 or 3 months haven't been great. If the Australian Open plays like last year, when it was really favoring flat hitters and it was super quick, if he faces Sinner, it's not a good matchup for him on these courts at all. So there is a very good chance that he's like the second, third contender for that. I wish the Australian Open, as I said earlier, was like later in the year. I wish he got like a bit
Yeah.
more time to ease into the new season. But then again, maybe you could argue that this allows him to use all that momentum that he got in the last 2 months. I don't know.
I mean,
Historically
if you
speaking,
think about it,
right?
it is completely nuts that the Australian Open is as soon as it is, as soon as the season starts. We literally get 2 weeks worth of tournaments, and an A presto is one of the 4 biggest events of the entire year. That's about to be played. I mean, I know I wrote an article for Popcorn Tennis last year. It was about how could the tour change its schedule at least, or how could it make changes to better accommodate for the fact of climate change and an ever heating up world. And one of my suggestions, actually, funny enough, was that move the Australian Open to March because it would be a slightly cooler period of time, and also would give us probably a bit of a better run up into the actual event than what we have currently. Because it's just it basically does value those players who can really turn it on very quickly. Or certainly those ones who are more experienced in a Grand Slam format to actually do quite well in the Australian Open. And looking back in recent years, it rarely had, you had to go back, I think, all the way to the noughties before you can find somebody who wasn't named Rafa, Roger, or Novak who actually has won the Australian Open. I mean, okay, you got Stan midway through the mid-teens as the exception to that rule, but it's really gone to those players who are much more experienced and a lot more at the higher end of the spectrum to actually win that tournament. Comparative to like something like the US Open, where there is a longer run up and it has had more varied winners.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually an interesting point. Yeah, then we would also not have the long break between the two first slams, which is also a consideration, I guess. But yeah, I never really wondered about this I guess, other than usually when I try to do these qualifying predictions, like for the Australian Open, they are so tough because we mostly get 1 week before they actually have to compete in that. So like we have zero intel on the players' forms whatsoever,
unless you're solely going off the Canberra and the new the new Caledonia
Numea,
challenges as your
yeah.
benchmark for what can happen.
Exactly. Like there are two challengers in that part of the world. If someone is playing the Australian Open qualifying, then he's probably competing in them. Some don't compete in anything before. So yeah, I mean, you just have no intel whatsoever regarding the form. And it's true. It's a little weird that it is so early in the season, and it's also caused issues before for like players who were trying to take their late form, form from later in the previous season to that swing, right? I mean, I don't know. Famously, of course, Felix Auger-Aliassime is probably the biggest example, but yeah, I mean, maybe it hits Sinner as well. But yeah, the tennis quality is there, of course. There's no denying that there is a very strong top four at the top of the sport at the moment. Probably a top three as well. Like I think Sinner has edged out Medvedev by enough.
Yeah, I mean,
That we can.
there's real concerns now. I say real concerns, or at least notable concerns with Medvedev in terms of all three of the other people around him, Sinner, Djokovic,
Yeah.
Alcaraz, have his number and have his number very well. The guy that was the main challenger to Djokovic effectively, 2 years ago, that was a real threat, doesn't really feel like as much of a threat as he should be. I mean, you expect him on a hard court to be able to at least make his way through the draw pretty comfortably, but as soon as he comes up against a Sinner, an Alcaraz, or a Djokovic, you kind of go, well, you kind of really know the result before it ends, and it's a horrible position for Medvedev to be in. And I really hope that he's able to find some sort of extra edge in those matches when they end up occurring, as we expect them to occur in Australia, so that it doesn't feel as though it's as inevitable a result as we currently feel at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess that would be it, more or less. Do we have anything else that we should talk about in regards to this, or any storyline, like a big picture, or anything about the match in itself?
I mean, it was just. I think the main thing was the crowd really got. Sinner was able to really use the crowd. He somehow becomes quite a bit of a hype man when it comes to the touring crowd. Doesn't do it the rest of the year, but absolutely loves the touring crowd to sort of help him out. And I mean, the only real sort of main thing I can think about is that I really hope that he's able to then carry this form on into the beginning of next year, because it'd be great to see like another Sinner Djokovic match at the Australian Open. And of course, we'd all love to see, because we all love seeing that contest, an Alcaraz Sinner match as well. I mean, the Miami one was excellent this year. It'd be great to have a Sinner Alcaraz match at the Australian Open, either in the semis or the final.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned that crowd thing, because actually Sinner, I feel like in the past wasn't that good at utilizing it, I guess, sort of playing with the crowd, right? But yeah, these days he's like a lot more he expresses a lot of emotions on the court. I guess that's also something he probably sort of intended to change, so it's probably by design. And yeah, definitely an important part of this match as well. Ghosty interested in the Molchan Sinner match already. Hope it's as good as Molchan Dimitrov for you, Ghosty. I really do. Although, yeah, I would feel sorry for Alex if he got that draw in Australia in round one.
I mean, at
Doesn't
those
seem
points,
like
you
a
get
good
that draw,
match.
you kind of feel like just packing your bags up and going like, this is a completely wasted trip.
I mean, at first he actually has to get into the main draw. Also,
Is he not in
because
there?
no,
Really? What's his ranking?
he's outside the top 100 now, like 120,
Ouch.
something like that.
I remember when he absolutely bossed it during that clay court season last year. Was it last year? I mean, I remember a
22
match.
probably 22.
Yeah, I remember when he played Cameron Norrie in one of the in a Norrie in a Leon match. I think it was like the semi.
Yeah.
No, it was the final. It was the final.
I think it was the final. Yeah.
It was a really good, high quality 3-set match. I'm like, well, this Molchan kid's here to stay, and really hasn't happened since then.
Yeah, had a pretty awful 2023. Other than that Dimitrov round one, which Ghosty just keeps mentioning all the time in the chat. It was a good match, though. I can't disagree with that. John also says in the chat that we will almost certainly be doing WT number 3 live later today as well. I'm not sure which matches remain there, but you guys can check it out and learn about it. When it comes to the ATP matches of 2023, of course, you already know that we are left with the 2 Djokovic Alcaraz clashes. Which one is first? You have to wait and see. So yeah, thank you,
Building
James, for
suspense,
this one.
almost like a drum being beated along the way as we move our way towards whichever match that will end up being. I don't even know.
Maybe John still doesn't know. Maybe he's still like, which one will be first, and he's just
There's
gonna decide.
There's a vault somewhere in like in the depths of John's or like talking tennis HQ somewhere where it's going to be like opened with a golden envelope at a point.
Yeah, apparently we are continuing our despicable war on Slovakian superstars. Anyway, as I told you, Ghosty, earlier, I'm a Lucas Klein fan, not an Alex Molchan fan. These two don't go hand in hand. Martin Kližan as well coming back, so big stuff for Slovak tennis, I guess. But anyway, yeah, we can definitely finish the stream now. We were talking about Djokovic Sinner Turin, of course. I feel like that's a pretty obvious number 3 pick, but in case you disagree, tell us about it in the comments. Maybe there's a match that we missed. Maybe there's a match that should have been number 3 instead. Maybe it's the Sinner Altmaier 5-hour clash that was at number 4. Who knows? Maybe it's the Dimitrov Molchan US Open round 1. Maybe just agree with Ghosty, and that should have been number 3. But anyway, keep tuning into these shows. And yeah, thank you, James, for the talk. And we can wrap it up here.
No worries. Good speaking to you, Damien.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.